In 1988, Michael Jackson spent more than $17 million on an empty stretch of California countryside and turned it into something no private citizen had ever attempted. A full amusement park, a working railroad, a zoo, gardens, lakes, and an entire private world built for one purpose: to give the most famous person on Earth somewhere he could disappear. For a few years, it worked. Then, in less than 2 decades, it was gone, not destroyed, not burned down, not demolished, just quietly emptied out. The rides were removed. The animals were relocated. The train stopped running. The gates were locked. A place that had taken years and hundreds of millions of dollars to build became almost silent before Michael Jackson turned 50. How does that happen? How does the most famous private home in the world go from fully alive to almost forgotten in under 20 years? The answer has almost nothing to do with money. When Michael Jackson bought the property, he could have purchased almost any mansion in America. Instead, he chose 2,700 acres of California countryside and spent years transforming it into a place unlike anything the world had seen. A Ferris wheel, a carousel, a private zoo, a movie theater, a working steam railroad. None of it was built to impress visitors. It was built so Michael could escape the world outside the gates. That was what the money was really buying. Not the rides, not the animals, the feeling of being a private person. For a while, Neverland delivered exactly that. Then, in 1993, allegations involving a young guest at Neverland placed the ranch at the center of worldwide attention. The case was settled out of court the following year, and no criminal charges were filed. But the legal outcome wasn't what changed Neverland. The attention did. The ranch had been built to keep the outside world away. Now the outside world was focused entirely on it. The escape had become the story. Michael continued living there for several years, but Neverland no longer served the purpose it had been built for. Then, in 2003, investigators searched the property during the criminal investigation that led to Michael Jackson's 2005 trial. He was acquitted on every count. But the search itself changed Neverland forever. The place that had been built as a private sanctuary had become a global headline. After the trial, Michael never returned to live there. Without its owner, the property entered a slow decline. Staff were reduced, maintenance slowed, the rides stopped operating, the zoo animals were relocated, the train stopped running. By 2008, the cost of maintaining Neverland had become overwhelming. Michael reached an agreement with Colony Capital that prevented foreclosure but transferred control of the property into a joint venture. The ranch was no longer entirely his. When Michael Jackson died the following year, many believed Neverland would reopen. It never did. The attractions disappeared. The property was renamed Sycamore Valley Ranch and eventually sold to a new owner. The estate still stands. But Neverland doesn't. Because Neverland was never really an amusement park, a zoo, or a railroad. Those were simply the visible parts of something much more personal. Looking at the property today, it's easy to focus on the empty train station, the silent carousel, and the mansion standing alone behind locked gates. But those things were never the dream. They were only the setting. The real attraction was something no architect could build. A place where the most famous person on Earth could stop performing. Stop being watched. Stop being Michael Jackson. Once that became impossible, Neverland had already ended.